My name is Johannes Knesl. I was born in Vienna, Austria. I was brought up there. I went to school there. I became an architect after spending some time at the University of Vienna, also studying philosophy and languages. And my background before university was what they called then a humanistic gymnasium. So I had to go through 6 years of Latin, and 4 years of Greek. I also had English 6 years. No, it was 8 years actually. No, 6 years, and then French 2 years. So I was kind of steeped from the beginning in broader thinking and philosophy. And I went into architecture because it seemed having a more impact on the world than staying in philosophy or languages. And so that's how my early formation was. I then migrated first to England, where I lived there for 2 years, working as an architect. I returned to Austria, Vienna, to teach at the university there for a year, and then left and went to America for 1 year, actually, to teach upstate New York in architecture and design and theory. And that turned out to be forever, because I'm still here in the States. And I had, because of my tendency towards critical philosophy, was not always so acceptable to architects who need to work with powerful people to help them become more powerful. So I then worked for 20 years in the city of New York and became the director of urban design for first the Department of Transportation and then the Department of Design and Construction, where I did a lot of open space work in the city of New York, creating open space where people could engage one another in a friendly way, and to maintain a kind of the basis of a polity, basically. So it is partly political, but it's also engagement with nature in the city that was important. And I then left to give my wife an opportunity to accept a position here in North Carolina at the Wake Forest University, and I'm still here. I also now separated, working from here on further projects, mostly pro bono projects in the city of New York, and in a way also preparing maybe some venture that will endeavor to allow people to cultivate their sensibility in an informal kind of setting, which may be something I will do in New York and might actually do together with Emil. I met him first when I was shopping around for a LASIK operation, and because my son had one, and even though I was already, I guess, maybe it was about 12, 13 years ago, so I was maybe in my late 50s, he thought I should do it, and I shopped around. I found a couple of, maybe not so many at the time, and Dr. Chin, with his kind of matter-of-factness, inspired some trust in me, and so I went with him. And that's how I met him, as a patient. And then continue as a patient, I gained more trust in him, basically because of the way he related to me with not just efficiency that he could trust as a patient, but also a sense of a sense of closeness that came through without any of the usual ways in which doctors embellish their relationship to their patients. It was a directness and an honesty that came through that made me trust him even more. So I went with him as a patient, and we went through the operations. I had one enhancement after that, and then I actually had no more contact with him for probably more than 10 years. And for some reason, I think it was the early summer last year, I got a notice through his propaganda machinery that he was participating in a Tour de France, and I was impressed by that. Not just because it was an athletic feat, but it was something that made me think this person has a lot of sides, so he's a little bit like a Renaissance person, and I like that. I mean, there are not many left. And so I emailed him, and then he said, "Oh, why don't you call me when I get back?" And that was in last year, about I think early August. And since then we have talked on the phone practically every week for an hour and a half, up to 2 hours. And so I became his unofficial impromptu life coach. And it's not a profession that I have because I am an architect. I'm also a theorist, a writer, a university professor formerly, and I'm also a practitioner and instructor of Qigong. So I have a broad knowledge of contemporary and ancient philosophy that I maintained throughout my life, inform my architectural work and other works. And so I find myself acting in this capacity, and it was a good relationship, partly because he and I, in some ways, quite similar. He is a person who has a drive for perfection, which is partly his own and partly comes from his family and his background, and this drive of perfection, which a lot of people have, in his case, is paired with sometimes even brutal honesty towards himself and towards others, which makes him an ideal life coaching client, because this honesty is great, because he can cut to the chase very quickly. And my style of life coaching is not to guide directly by leading people by the hand, but to work with people together and find ways to allow them to see more for themselves, so they can take their own action. And this is ideal for him because that's the kind of person he is. So we've been doing, I think, very well as far as we've been going, life coach and client, so to speak. And so it's this sense and drive to perfection, the total commitment to that, which comes through in all areas of his life. So it also comes through in his relationship with his patients, with his employees, and also in his search for a life partner now. And so that's what we're working on now, because the idea of perfection that we partly inherit and which we partly cultivate ourselves is frequently mainly formed by outer conditions, the conditions for success. And I think this also has been the case for Emil. And we're trying to shift this idea of perfection to what in a situation is helping everybody around. He has already a strong leaning in that direction. And so it's actually not that hard work, not that hard a path for him to tread, but it will take time. And so it's really a matter of what often comes across to other people as bluntness, and maybe being overly direct. That comes out of his sense of needing to get more out of himself into life. He wants to give actually a lot. And people sometimes cannot really accept that because he has a lot to give, basically, and he gives it in a way that is not embellished by the ways in which the norms of interaction today buffer everything, so that people can maintain their own comfort zones without being bothered by someone who actually has something to give, but when receiving it, they would have to slightly shift out of their comfort zone. And I think that's really what's happening there. It's happening in all areas, also in his search for a partner. People can be overwhelmed by this way of seeking perfection. And this total commitment that he has, it's just too much for many people. And in fact, it has been perhaps too much for many of the would-be partners that he has been entertaining and been in touch with.